Hey, what's up guys, Aarava here, and welcome back to the episode of my F1 2019 career mode, episode number 17 today for the Russian Grand Prix. If you guys did miss the previous episode, then be sure to go check that one out before you see this one at the Singapore Grand Prix. But we get into Russia then, and it's going to be another maybe difficult weekend for us, a bit of a comeback drive once again needed at this circuit, because we've got engine penalties to take. We took some at Singapore, but in hindsight, I probably should have taken more at Singapore essentially, because we've got a few more parts that are wearing out to the point where I need to soon take those penalties. So I may as well take them in Russia, where we have some long straights to overtake potentially. In terms of upgrades going to this weekend, we're actually not bringing any, and a lot of the midfield teams around us are all bringing at least some minor upgrades, so we might see a bit more competition perhaps in qualifying and the race, but we just about stay put there around the likes of Renault and Racing Point on paper, but obviously that can definitely change when we get into actual reality on track. But there will be also some rain forecast for this weekend, which will be another spanner in the works. Obviously we had an entire wet race to Singapore, so we're getting very used to some wet weather racing lately in this F1 2019 career mode. It looks like the rain may be coming down on Saturday, and then Sunday might be all dry, so Saturday might be quite a useless session for us actually, usually, because obviously sometimes it's quite good to get up the order when you have penalties to kind of cushion that blow, but we're taking so many penalties I think this race that it won't matter. And then equally on top of that, if it's going to rain, then there's not much point doing much running anyway, so this might be a bit of a short Saturday compared to previous ones. But either way, let's get into that then and see how it goes firstly.
Welcome F1 fans, where qualifying will be starting in the next few minutes as the teams prepare to get out on track at the Sochi Autodrome here in Russia. And as we count down to that green light, I have to say, Anthony Davidson, that this rain is not showing any signs whatsoever of abating. I imagine we'll be looking at some last-minute setup changes to better adapt these cars to the conditions. What do you think?
The trouble is, Crofty, they need to be thinking about the race tomorrow. You don't want to go jacking up the ride heights and piling on a few points of extra downforce that you're not going to want in the Grand Prix itself. The Parc Fermé regulations mean that you have to make that choice. The best thing the drivers can do is adapt with the tools they have available in the cockpit. Moving the brake bias forward will help stop the rear end slipping out under braking, and opening up the differential can really help tame the oversteer on corner exit. The drivers that can make best use of these techniques will have the best chance for success here today.
Right, so here we are then in Q1, and indeed it is soaking here at the Russian Grand Prix. Full wet tyres needed there, so we exited the Singapore Grand Prix having used the full wet tyres for the first time properly in that weekend, and now we're back on them again here in Q1 at Russia. And you can see it's really quite damp here, as we have to go very slow into turn 2, and the car feeling very uneasy through this next left-hander, the long left-hander of turn 3. And you can see we're about to go into a mega drift as the rear end steps out so much. Now remember, it is a dry race forecast, so my setup here was pretty much a dry setup, so I'm not surprised the car was feeling so horrendous and unbalanced, but I was surprised how easily that rear end did step out there. Hardly trying to put on the power too much there, but the nose just kind of bit in and the rear end did not, and it's just completely gone. But at that point, I pretty much switched off my mind in terms of I knew Saturday was going to be pointless then, because we were going to take so many penalties that no matter where we qualified, we would be at the back of the grid, and it's wet quality as well, which is horrendous anyway, so there is no point in us really trying that much. So we come across the line, it's a meaningless lap time, and what we're going to do is just sit to the end, and we're going to come in stone dead last there. Raikkonen gets through into Q2, but it won't matter for us because we're going to take so many penalties in a second that it just really won't, because we're going to do pretty much everything on the engine side. Now this is what I should have done at Singapore, I will fully admit, but I couldn't see that far ahead of myself in terms of at Singapore when taking those penalties that a lot of parts were actually wearing out. So now we've got the internal combustion engine wearing out, the MGU-H, things like the energy store, the turbocharger, whereas at Singapore all we did was the MGU-K and the control electronics. And what we can do here on top of that is alter the gearbox as well, because if you're already going to get so many penalties to be at the back of the grid, you may as well take another penalty to break the gearbox seal and change that. You can see the wear was about 71%, so very close to maybe getting into that failure zone, or just issues where the gearbox jams. We've had 2 of those issues so far this season, so taking that nice and early here in that kind of sense. So it's been a bit of a double whammy in the last 2 episodes of these penalties, but now that we're past this penalty after this race, I think we should be able to go all the way to the end of the season now without any more grid penalties, which would be a good thing, because usually the AI like to take a lot of penalties right at the end of Brazil and Abu Dhabi for the last 2 games are anything to go by. So let's get to this race. It should be a bit more of an action-packed day compared to that Saturday we had, which was literally just 1 lap pretty much, but we know it's going to be a bit of a tough one from the very back of the grid, but we had a very good comeback at Singapore, so who's to say we can't do the same here at Russia. Let's get into the race.
Good afternoon from Sochi as we prepare to get underway for the Russian Grand Prix. The championship battle has some time to go yet, but still expect no quarter to be given here on this circuit that made its debut in 2014 and has already seen some classic racing. Built on the shores of the Black Sea, the Sochi Autodrome is a 3.6-mile tour around some of the venues built for the 2014 Winter Olympic Games. Close barriers may make overtakes more challenging, but with 56% of the lap taken absolutely flat out, we certainly won't be wanting for pure speed. A fitting arena then to do battle at the pinnacle of motorsport. Alongside me to discuss all the action today is Anthony Davidson. Thanks for joining us, Ant, and tell me, you were down in the pit lane earlier. How do you think the track conditions are today?
Well, the surface looks clean enough, but I'm a little bit worried about the track temperature. It's pretty cool out there, which could give some teams difficulties when it comes to keeping their tyres in the right operating window. The cars out there that work their tyres hard and really put a lot of energy through them, they'll be the ones that are better off.
With the race minutes away from starting, here's what today's grid rundown looks like. Good job yesterday from Valtteri Bottas. The Finn starts from pole position and Lewis Hamilton completes the front row. Looking at the rest of today's grid, we have Leclerc, Vettel, Pierre Gasly and Verstappen, Hülkenberg, Russell, Perez and Daniel Ricciardo, Butler, Stroll, Lando Norris and Sainz, Magnussen, Raikkonen. They'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. Alexander Albon and Lucas Faber, the engineer, and Romain Grosjean sits at the back of the grid. And now it's time to head down to the track.
Alright, so here we are on the grid, not even in last place, P19, ironically, because other people have, well, somehow have more penalties than me. I don't understand how that's happened, because I took literally the max engine penalties and gearbox, so I think Grosjean might have just impeded someone in qualifying, but Raikkonen's also taken penalties. So as a team, we've tactically taken a lot here at Sochi, so let's hope, fingers crossed, our car, therefore, is going to be good, because I would like to think maybe Raikkonen would have chosen to take those penalties at a race where he thinks he can go well and overtake some cars. Of course, we've got that long back straight, and our car has generally been good in a straight line and in the trying to drag situations with DRS opens. It's been a one-stop soft tyre to the mediums, not a lot of tyre wear around here, so strategy-wise, might not be able to do anything clever, but there is actually, there is a tiny bit of rain maybe coming towards the end of this Grand Prix, so that might be a little bit of a spanner of work, might be a kind of China kind of vibe where it comes right at the end, and so there might be some last-minute overtakes to be made, but we'll have to cross that bridge once we get to it. Let's just get into this then at the start and see how this opening stint goes. As we now go to 5 red lights here in Sochi for the Russian Grand Prix, another comeback drive in store maybe today for us in this episode. Final lights are out and we're underway from P19. It's a bit of a slow start there compared to Lucas Weber in the Williams up ahead of us. We do get a good enough start to get ahead of Romain Grosjean at least into turn 1, which is just a kink there, but you can see it's all kicking off as Albon gets pushed off nearly into the wall there. Raikkonen sandwich in the middle. We're going to go down the inside along with Weber, and Weber has a massive dive bomb there, about 5-6 cars, and he's already up into maybe P12 as we're now on the outside of Albon there, wrestling for position in turn 3, but we've already got our teammate Raikkonen there at the very start of this race, so that's at least good. We dive down the inside of Albon though, catch him napping somewhat into the next right-hander before we get to the end of sector 1, but a very good start there. That was from our former F2 teammate Weber, and you can see already up ahead, 3 cars ahead of me there. We've got Norris, Stroll and Magnussen in between. Can we try and get Lando Norris, who's going very slowly actually through this next right-hander? We go around the outside there, little bit off circuit, having to ride the curb. We get around the outside of our fellow countryman up into P15, so overall not too bad, but now we're going to be behind Lance Stroll. But the Racing Point car is very slippery in a straight line, as is obviously we saw the Williams car at the Italian Grand Prix, and that will be the issue for me as we move on late in this race, lap 3, and we're still not even that, close to getting past Lance Stroll. We got close in the last few corners of sector 3, but then on the straight you can see he's just waltzing away and comfortably has us covered there, so a bit frustrating and very much kind of like real life, having to just sit behind and unable to make the pass, even though theoretically on paper we should have the pace to overtake this car. It might take us a little bit longer, and we move on to the end of lap 3 as we go under the bridge now, and like I said, we were catching him in sector 3, so I'm going to have to try my hardest to maybe try and find a way past him in these next few corners as we try and get as tight as we can on the entry and exit to the apex. We get a little bit close to his gearbox, enough that he goes defensive to the next right-hander, so that's going to compromise his line so much so that we go to the inside, a little bit of a switchback move essentially from the left to the right, and we're going to the inside of the last corner, and we're up into P14 then, so we finally got Lance Stroll, but he might just come back at us now with DRS because he was within 1 second of Magnussen here, so we look behind us. Where is he going to be? We're going to go defensive into turn 2, and we're going to get a little bit hot into the brake zone there. Lock up on the front tyre, quite a major one. Have to really go wide and deep and slow the car down and lose a lot of momentum to keep the car on the track, and that will invite Lance Stroll to come back through turns 3. We're also on non-ERS at this moment in time on the track, as we're deploying a lot of electrical energy on the back straight, and that's draining the battery quite quickly, actually, a lot more than I want to, and so that's going to allow Stroll to pounce on the inside of that next right-hander. Very surprised, actually, to make some contact there. Wasn't expecting it at all there, but he just got such a great exit. He's still there, makes some contact on my rear end. He's actually got the move done now, and we're now wrestling for position there, side by side through the next right-hander, and to the left he cuts across us and has us, so we have to actually tuck back in behind and go for another re-overtake. This is on the back straight, and that was already just due to the ERS there. I think Stroll just had so much more to give, and I was still saving some. We go back to overtake mode though, finally. DRS open as well, and we're in stand mission at this point because I want to save some fuel for the end of the race, but we eventually do get him back for P14, and now I can try and push away, but that was a little bit frosty there, and again, you know, showing the AI are very, very good at using the ERS basically, and this track is seemingly very tough at the deployment, but we now catch up to Lucas Weber after that amazing turn 1, or turn 2 rather, I should say, on lap number 1. We've finally caught back up to him. We see the rear end. We're going to go to the left-hand side of him. He's got DRS, but we've got DRS as well, and some good speed with overtake mode on ERS. We're going to get boxed still a little bit though with Magnussen, and it's a little bit nerve-wracking there, being on that, you know, slight left-hander, but with the DRS open, you're going so quickly, the rear end does get a little bit floaty there, and even more so under the tunnel, you can see Cohen having to go opposite lock, drifting the car through, and we're still neck and neck with Weber. We now switch it back, brake early, and switch it to the right-hand side. He's on the left now, and we're on the inside for the last 2 corners. We should be able to squeeze him out now, going a little bit wide, not on purpose really, more just so the lock up there on the right-hand side, but it helps us out there, and we're up into P13 now, ahead of our former F2 teammate, but he might be able to get us. Remember, the Williams car very good in a straight line, so it's not over yet. So as we go towards turn 2, let's just be wary. We've got not too much ERS to deploy as well, which I'm worried about through turns 3, as we go again defensive to the inside of turn 2. That tightens up our line, compromises it, and you can see the exit that Weber's got. He's back down the inside. He's ahead of us though momentarily. We now go and jostle for position again to the next right-hander, turn 4. Very awkward obviously for the car on the outside to keep it through, and we are going to squeeze him out and be up into P13, and eventually we will keep that as well, as we now move on to lap number 8, and we're going to be overtaking Magnussen in a straight line with DRS, and this one's going to be a little bit easier still again though, a little bit nerve-wracking on that, on switching it to the outside there. You kind of saw I had to hesitate a little bit, lift off a tiny bit, because the rear end really does like to step out so quickly when you go in such high speed with DRS open, even in a slight little left-hander, but we are up the position and into P12 now. The next man to try and overtake is Dan Ricciardo, or I say it would be Devin Butler there for now, but Devin Butler is going to go and overtake Ricciardo once again to get up into P11 there. So my former F2 rival, this is doing a good job there actually for once, because I've spoken about it in another video that Butler hasn't been performing as well as Weber generally this season so far, but Butler that time has made the overtake work there, and Ricciardo might be susceptible to an overtake if he's too focused on the Toro Rosso, because here we are now on lap 11 watching this side-by-side battle. So can we catch both of them napping, maybe make a double overtake? Here we go to the inside of turn 3. Ricciardo though is going to pinch me right to the wall and the curb, and he doesn't even see me pretty much. It kind of acts like I'm not there, and again he goes wide and squeezes me out there, and it works out. It's a very harsh defensive job from him, but it works out. But that was probably on the fine margins of the penalty, I would say, because he was pretty much pushing me towards the wall on that flat out left-hander. But here we come now, eventually going to overtake him in a straight line. DRS open, going to get very aggressive with him as we cut across, and we're now up into the points paying position. So again, like Singapore, good recovery. Obviously Singapore was a bit of a quicker recovery actually due to the wet weather. This time around still pretty decent, you know, 11 laps gone, 10 you know, up to P10, so nearly just about a lap of position, I guess you could say, because we started P19 though, so just a little bit less than that. But we're now going to search on weather report on lap 12, because you can see, visually speaking, it's a lot more overcast than it was a few laps ago, and so I feel like that rain that was forecast on the strategy might be coming up a little bit earlier than usual. We're now up into P6, because some people have made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix. We're going to continue on, ignore our engineers' calls to come in for the medium tyres, because I reckon the rain's coming a lot sooner than that indicator showed. And if it comes early enough, you know, talking about lap 16 maybe, I could go long enough on these soft tyres, you know, have the pain of the tyre wear, but then go straight onto intermediates and maybe gain a lot of positions. And right now I have that track position, of course, and here we go now, lap 13, midway through lap 13, the rain, the spots of rain are already on the screen here, so the rain, the instance periods might only be 2-3 laps away, so if we can hold out on these tyres, we could do some absolute bits at the very end of this race. But for now, Hamilton will catch us. He's trying to make a move move to the inside. He will make that pretty easy. Obviously, there's no point me fighting him too much. He's got fresh mediums. I've got very worn soft tyres, so there's not much point fighting him. Neither is there much point fighting Sebastian Vettel now as we move on to lap 14. Right now, essentially, I'm not racing these guys. I'm racing the likes of the bottom top 10, Hulkenbergs, you know, the other guys around me, Perez, who we haven't seen this race so far, but were there in the top 10. Remember, I was only P10, so I'm trying to jump the few other guys who are ahead of us with like P7, P6, maybe best of the rest when the rain fully does come down. It is intermediate periods later on, but right now, we're still struggling on. It's not quite wet enough yet, even though it's looking wetter by the minute. Bottas now down the inside of mediums with that to P5. The next car along will be Max Verstappen, but he has a bit of a gap to us, so that might be a little bit of a longer wait until he comes to overtake us, but eventually that will happen on lap 16. But now is where I'm getting a little bit worried, because it's Leclerc who comes down the inside. He's overtaken Verstappen. Now he overtakes us into turn 2, and the rain has yet to fully settle on the track to the point where my engineer said it's time for inters. So at this point, I can't lie, I thought maybe I gambled a bit too much and I made a mistake here. Maybe I should have pit for, like, you know, another set of soft tyres and done a very aggressive two-stop essentially, because right now it's still dry enough for the slick tyres to work. You saw there how quickly Verstappen walks past me. So at this moment, I may have made a mistake here in this very bold strategy call. And as we move on 2 laps later to the end of lap 18, my dry tyres now are way too worn, and either way, I have to come in for inters. My engineer's not told me it's time for inters. The DRS is still active, so technically, it really shouldn't be inters weather yet, but I have to go on them because my tyres now are pretty much like 70% worn, I think, or towards 80, so I could have got a puncher maybe in the next lap if I continued on. And you saw there my pace was horrendous. I basically had a huge train of 5 cars behind me. You know, at the front of it was Hulkenberg right there in the Racing Point cars. So I have to go on to inters on lap 19. We've got, you know, less than 10 laps to go. I just got to pray now the rain just really starts to bucket down, and essentially I'm going to gain some time whilst being on inters for maybe 2-3 laps whilst everyone is still trundling around on those slick tyres. But at this moment, we're now P20. I'm the only one in inters. You can fully, I will fully admit at this moment, I thought I completely threw away my race. You know, I was P10, could have been still P10 if I pit onto another set of slick tyres with everyone else, but I chose to gamble it, and at this point, I wasn't feeling too confident, because it's lap 21 now, I'm still last place, I've got no one around me, and it's not looking too great. I mean, the weather looks the exact same. It doesn't look any wetter, it doesn't feel any wetter either, and the inters feel pretty slow. So at the moment I was just praying for any sort of action to come, any sort more rain to come, and I had to hold out, and eventually on lap 23 we start to catch Alexander Albon. He has an issue with his car, so we're up into P19 there, but you can see there is a big train of cars up ahead on the minimap on the bottom left, and that is all the AI starting to struggle in these wet conditions. It's slowly, very subtly now become inters weather, but all of them are being too stubborn right now and staying out on slick tyres. So this is where we earn our money. This is where the gamble is going to pay off, and we're basically going to have an overtake montage galore here coming up in a bit, as we're going to basically waltz past all these guys, even more so than we did at Singapore, because obviously they're on slick tyres now compared to just, you know, having poor traction versus the player on intermediate. And so you saw that we nipped down the inside of Carlos Sainz very easily. Grosjean going a little bit wide there on the exit, that left-hander, so up into P17 now. And then we've got Norris, Stroll and Magnussen all bunched up together, and in one traction zone we're going to overtake all 3 of them. And now this is where my smug face comes out, because this is finally where our strategy is going to work out. I was genuinely worried I threw away that race, but no, now I'm confident we are going to we're going to bring this back to even better where we were. We were P9, P10. I'm fully confident we now can be even higher and in some decent points here today, because these guys are going so slow now and the pace difference is unbelievable. I'm literally catching about 5 cars every single sector here as we now catch up to Lucas Weber now struggling in the Williams car. Is he going to come in? No, he's not. So the AI being so stubborn, it's lap 24. There are 4 laps left, or 3 laps after this one, and they're still thinking they can make it to the end of the slick tyres. There's just no way they can do that. So we're up into P13 now. We've overtaken Lucas. We'll catch up to Devin Butler eventually as well on lap 25. Here we go, catching up to him and my teammate Raikkonen. So that'll be a bit embarrassing for Kimi as we go down the inside of Devin in the Toro Rosso on that left-hander where we first overtook Carlos Sainz. Bit of contact made, of course, because he tried to squeeze me there. Unsurprisingly from Butler. We go down the inside of Kimi, making a bit of a late dive, but I had to make it work. And we're now into P11, and we've got a bit of a gap to Ricciardo, but they're going to be so slow that we're going to catch up to Ricciardo literally straight away in the last last sector. Finally now, some guys come in. We've got Hulkenberg in the pit lane there, Perez in the pit lane, so some smart people finally on this grid coming in for inters, but we overtake Ricciardo, who continues on. Russell's continued on, even though he was in a top 10 position in a Williams. He thought, no, I'll continue on slick tyres, even though it's fully now inters weather. So he's going to chuck away a very good result, or potential good result, as we're now going to go for an overtake on the outside. Bit of a long way back, but of course the slick tyres now no match for the inters, and we're up into P7. So absolutely amazing. This strategy has gone from 0 to 100 very quickly indeed, and it's been completely bulletproof now. It worked out. So there's no doubt in my mind that was the right call. Maybe it could have gone a little bit more smoothly if I did maybe start on mediums, but obviously I had to, well, actually, yeah, I could have actually chosen mediums, but in hindsight you can say a lot of things. But if I did choose mediums, we probably could have gone a little bit smoother. But we're now in P7, chasing after Pierre Gasly on the last lap of the Grand Prix. He's still on medium, so that is a horrendous decision from the Frenchman. We're going to go on the outside, turn 3, nice and easy though, because it's still tricky in these inters around turn 3. But we're up into P6 now, so better than best of the rest here in this race. And remember, this was from P19 on the starting grid, so it's been another, for a second time in a row, another amazing recovery drive here in this Alfa Romeo Racing car as we go through the last few corners and come home at the Russian Grand Prix in P6. That is a very good race, in my opinion.
Okay, good job, mate. Really well done. That was a fantastic drive.
What do you think it was, Ant, that gave them the edge over the competition today?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection. A shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
After an excellent performance at the Grand Prix, I'm sure there'll be plenty of celebrations tonight amongst the Mercedes team, and they certainly deserve it.
So in the end, Raikkonen did actually get some points there, so it's a double points paying position for Alfa Romeo there, but an amazing race for us, really solid. Like I said, at one point I really did think I chucked that away, so I'm kind of very relieved it came back there. That was very dramatic at the end, overtaking so many cars in one foul swoop, but there we go. And so we retain obviously our position in the Drivers' Championship. We actually start to close up a little bit to Pierre Gasly there, so we're piling on the pressure onto that Frenchman in the Red Bull there in a much lower car, in the Alfa Romeo car, and we're obviously still in no man's land in P4. We get to the end of the episode though, we unfortunately have some bad news. We don't get an extra 600 resource points for the contract bonus because we don't get enough championship points there, so that's a little bit unfortunate because that could definitely help us out with the R&D reset that will eventually come, I'm guessing, because we've been given an email, so I would like to think it's going to come pretty soon in one of these episodes. But for now, at the end of it, all we have to deal with is a contract renegotiation here with Alfa Romeo, so we can try and ask for essentially just a few more things in terms of level 3 on the upgrade speed, the simultaneous development, and the race bonuses. You know, we've done very well lately, and eventually we do renegotiate the contract successfully there with a lot of great perks. That's going to be awesome for the rest of the season, and hopefully we'll end it out pretty strong, but obviously we are going to have to save some points for that reset. So right now we're not purchasing too much there, and we're just kind of holding station for now, just being a little bit cautious on that and making sure we have enough points to kind of adapt every single aero part there. Obviously we can purchase stuff on the chassis side and engine side, which will carry forward to next season. So I was debating a major chassis weight reduction, and in the end I actually just went for it. You know, I thought it'll come in from Mexico, that'll be quite useful, and because the chassis won't get reset, that will still be quite a useful purchase actually for the end of the season. So I've gone for that one purchase, but we've still got well over 2,500 points to try and adapt the aero at least for the regulation change, which I think will probably come in pretty soon in the next 2 episodes, I would say, if we go off what happened in F1 2018 there. But you can see now we've got a whole column of new parts for the engine, so like I said at the very start, we should now be completely clean for the rest of the season. We shouldn't have to take a single grid penalty now to the very end at Abu Dhabi there, whereas the AI, I'm sure they will do at Brazil and Abu Dhabi as they have done last year's game, unless it's majorly changed and the coding's changed for this year's game, but I doubt it. But guys, if you did enjoy the episode, then another amazing recovery drive like Singapore, then be sure to smash that like button. Let me know your thought in the comments below. If you are new around here, subscribe for weekly full-on content. I've been Aarava. Have a good day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.